Welcome to Generalist Magic, how to conjure new ideas on demand. This is a brand new workshop that I've designed and I'm trying out, so please bear with me as it is the first time and I really hope you enjoy it. It is going to be a little bit different from perhaps other workshops that you've experienced, but that is very much the point. Please lean into your silliness, your magic. This is really about leaning into what makes generalists generalists. So, why are we here today? We are here because I'm sure that many of you, like me, have also had the experience of your imagination in the workplace, perhaps not being treated as you want it to be treated. It's often, I find, the reason why we're able to add so much value to an organization as generalists, but it's often not the reason why we might get a job or a contract. So, what I would love for you to leave today's session with is you giving permission to yourself to treat your imagination as a really serious, practical method that you can use on a day-to-day basis to tell your story, tackle complex problems, and adopt new perspectives. So, we'll all have had a very good day if you leave the workshop able to deliberately conjure new ideas, stories, and possibilities on demand. I've recently discovered that you can add GIFs to pitch presentations, so do expect to see a couple of these throughout the deck. Cool. So here is what you can expect from today. I'm going to start off by telling you a little bit about myself and why I'm here. Then I'm going to introduce you to a concept known as the fantastic binomial, which some of you may have come across. Then we're going to talk about something that I feel is one of a generalist's greatest superpowers, but also one of the least talked about ones. And then we're going to get into the really practical part where I'm going to show you three magic tricks or spells, take your pick, that you can use at work whenever you need some fresh inspiration or you feel like your ideas are getting a little bit stale. And then lastly, we are going to leave, I'll try and leave sort of 10 to 15 minutes for a Q&A at the end. Don't hold back here. Feel free to ask me anything about imagination, creativity, writing, portfolio careers, generalism, whatever is alive for you at the moment. So, without further ado, let's get going. Also, just as an FYI, I don't have the chat open, but if you do want to share anything, Edge can take you off mute, so just pop your hand up and we'll go from there. Cool. So, hello. My name is Nikita. I am a writer, an educator, and as I like to say, a librarian of alternative worlds and words. I'm obsessed with anything to do with imagination, creativity, and generalism, of course. I have spent some time working at LinkedIn. I've developed interdisciplinary learning institutions in London and Tokyo. I like to think I was a portfolio careerist before it was cool, but maybe that's just me and everyone else. And as Edger mentioned at the start, I am one of the co-creators, along with the wonderful Lindsay Lerner, of GW's very own Unboxed career course. So let's shatter the ice because apparently breaking it is not enough. What I would love for you to do is to go to the link that I believe Edger is now going to share in the chat and have a little play with this Claude tool. I'm not going to give you any other context right now, but what I do want you to do is click the button that says conjure two strangers and then marry them differently. And what I want you to do is write the opening line of the story that your pair of words suggests to you. That is all that the prompt is. I'm only going to give you a couple of minutes, so literally the first thing that comes to your mind. And then I'm going to ask some brave volunteers to share their opening lines. Cool. I'm going to start the timer now. Go for it. Sure. So I just saw a couple of people asking for the instruction again. So if you click on the link that Edge has shared in the Zoom chat, it should take you to a tool that looks like what is currently on the screen. And I want you to click the button that says conjure two strangers, and it should come up with two random words, such as beehive and eclipse. And then if you click marry them differently, it'll give you like a between word, like dreaming of or disguised as. And then what I want you to do is take that prompt. So in this case, the beehive dreaming of the eclipse, and write the opening line of a story that it inspires for you. Let me know if you have any more questions. Okay, just a few more seconds. Nice, Edra. Thank you for sharing. Cool. So feel free to either share in the chat what your opening line was, as demonstrated by Edger, or I would love if anyone wants to raise their hand and come off mute and share out loud as well. Oh, lots of wardrobes. Wow. Okay, I'm gonna read some of these out. The dog was in the closet, the baby wasn't. The glaciers don't talk like we do, their thoughts echo forever. So it's easy for one glacier to mistake another for an echo of itself. Ooh, intriguing. I want to read the rest of that. The wardrobe is a very square wardrobe and is in love with the very unsquare dog. Very good. Once there was a wardrobe that was in love with a dog. Okay, maybe this tool is not as random as I thought it was. The orchestra echoed through the cave. Nice. On an abandoned writer's desk in the middle of a cottage in the Cotswolds, the keys of a typewriter could be heard clicking and clacking through the window with no human in sight. Kinza, I love it. Okay, wow, I love all of these. Okay, yeah, apparently lots of wardrobes and dogs. Um, oh my gosh, these are all great. Wow. Thank you all for sharing. Whoever wrote The Cactus is Allergic to the Circus is wonderful. You are not blanking at all. I can't wait to read what that story says. Okay, cool. This is great. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing. We will move on for now, but I literally made this tool for this workshop. Whether it works well or not, different question, but feel free to use it anytime when you need inspiration. So, now that the ice has been shattered, I want to introduce you to a good friend of mine known as the fantastic binomial. So, in the 1970s, there was this Italian guy who came across this insight that thought is always formed in pairs. It's really hard to imagine any concept without its opposite. Can you imagine hard without soft or generalist without specialist? It maybe is possible, but for most people, it's really, really difficult to just imagine something as an isolated word or concept without its opposition. And another interesting thing is that we usually find words with their families, right? So if we're talking about our first cousin who lives in Guatemala, we're probably going to think about our sister in the same field of words. In the same way, we'll probably find dog with horse and computer with laptop. But the thing about creativity is that creative ideas and novel thoughts are often born from distant pairs of words that we don't usually find together. So in 1973, in this tiny little town outside of Milan, someone named Gianni Rodari coined the term fantastic binomial to refer to the idea of completely different words coming together and creating a completely new idea. So, an example might be, as we've just seen, bottle and unicorn, that might look something like this. Or plant and minivan, that might look something like this. Or even monster and pineapple, that could look something like this. The idea here is that when you take something that has maybe never been associated with something else, sparks start to fly between them. And we never know what's going to come out the other side. Now, you might be wondering, why are you telling us about this niche concept from this random Italian man? I'm telling you about it, one, admittedly, because I love Gianni Rodari and his work, and I think that everything that he writes about is amazing. But also because I think he's hit upon an insight that is so important for us to understand and take advantage of as generalists, because it's a real superpower for us. Some of these terms might apply to you. Maybe you're a web developer, a marketer, a gallerist, an engineer, a creator, a pastry chef, a speaker, a UX researcher, and I'm sure so many other things. I want you to know that you are a walking fantastic binomial. All of these worlds that you've lived in, don't worry if this is how you look right now, everything will become clear. All of these worlds that you've lived in, every job, every hobby, obsession, distraction, random thing on the side, every passion project or side hustle is a magical word that you have up your sleeve. Whether it is creator, engineer, marketer, or pastry chef, have you ever really stopped and asked yourself what happens at the intersection of all those crazy worlds that you've lived in? Because I know I hadn't. So, the first exercise I would love for us to do is I want you to we'll take maybe a bit more than 2 minutes, and I want you to pick two of your most distant worlds and marry them together. So, you might think of that time when, I don't know why I'm thinking about pastry chefs, but hey, you might think of that time when you were trained as a pastry chef and you were learning all about how to bake sourdough. And you might think, what did baking sourdough teach me about growth marketing? Or I might think about how years and years ago, one of my first ever jobs was waitress. This is very niche, by the way, and very British, I think, but I used to waitress on this steam train in the south of England called the Bluebell Railway. And we basically did silver service, which for anyone who doesn't know is when you like, it's basically really fancy service of a three-course meal. And I might think about how carrying a massive tray of roast beef around up and down this train that was moving for like 6 hours at a time, what did that teach me about my writing practice? Okay, so these are the kinds of questions I want you to ask yourself. And then I'm going to ask a couple of people to share what comes out for them. So I'll give you 3 minutes to think through this. Cool. One more minute. Cool, that is time. I've just seen a comment in the chat that I absolutely feel needs a story shared around it. Marlene, are you willing to come off mute and share a little bit with us? I'm also not sure if this is a joke or no worries if you'd prefer not to. But I would love for a couple people to share what came up for them during this exercise. So if you want to, no worries. If you want to raise your hand and then I think Edger can take you off mute, that would be great.
Happy to go. So I love classical music, Western classical. And I was thinking about things that are very distant from each other. I took it literally as geographically. About 6 or 7 years ago, I used to live in New Delhi, and I went on this trip to Chile, which was like literally almost the longest distance that I traveled diagonally across the world. And there was one point where I was walking down the streets of Chile, and it was kind of like buskers, but it was a full orchestra. They were playing Mozart on the street. And so that was the piece around music by surprise because I wasn't expecting it. But I think back to now, and we have a radio in our house, and it's permanently set to classic FM. So like you just press the button and it plays classical music. And so I think that's an interesting juxtaposition for me of when music surprises, the same kind of music, it just takes you by surprise versus where you can conjure it on demand. So
Mhm.
it's a very circuitous story, but hopefully it makes sense.
It does. Thank you so much for sharing. Lovely insight. Nadia, would you like to share?
Hi, yeah, this is Naja.
Sorry.
Um, oh no, you're fine. It always happens. Um, I thought of my time in undergrad where I worked in special collections at the library as a preservation assistant,
Mhm.
and how critical it is to understand the material you're working with before you start to do any sort of procedure.
Mhm.
The examples that always bring to mind are art books, like the pasta book that is made out of pasta, or the book about the history of ironing, where the text only shows up if you iron the pages. Obviously, those books can't be handled in the same way by any stretch of the imagination. And then I connected it to my work as a program manager, where a lot of the work you're doing exists in the space of ambiguity. But if
Mhm.
you don't start with solid understanding of the basics of the problem that you're trying to solve, you're not going to come to a correct solution or decision.
Love that. I'm so curious to see this book that has to be ironed for the words that appear. What a great idea. Thank you, Nadia. Cool. Maybe one last person, if there is anyone who wants to share. Otherwise, we can move on. I think I saw a couple of hands, but maybe not. Okay, lovely. Cool. Thank you both for sharing. So that was a little warm up. And I really want to share this quote with you because it's one of my favorites. And it's from something called Notes from a Public Typewriter, which some of you may have come across. And it says that a bookstore is larger than the universe. After all, the universe only contains what is. And I was thinking about this quote when I was putting this presentation together, and I was like, gosh, a generalist is so much larger than the workplace because, after all, the workplace only contains what is. And hopefully, you get what I mean by that. But maybe to explain a little bit, if imagination really is something that we see as one of the generalist's greatest superpowers, then imagining alternative possibilities, different ways that we could do things, different means of hiring, different ways of building companies, different ways of funding, then really we do exist outside of the workplace or the office. We are creating all of these possibilities in our minds and then somehow trying to translate them to reality. And sometimes it works beautifully, and sometimes not so much, but that's all part of the imaginative process. So, I would love to remind you that regardless of what anyone may have told you when you were a kid, as I know often happens, or more likely what someone told you as an adult at work, your imagination is so much more than a fun gimmick. It is a real practical problem-solving tool. And I want to share with you three magic tricks that I think really help us exercise our imagination in a very tangible way. So, the first one is, as I've already shared, the fantastic binomial, which we're going to use in a slightly different way in a second. The second is called make a riddle. And the third is called cross the border. So, what we're going to do is we're going to go through each of these one by one. I'm going to give you a little explanation and a couple of examples. And then I'm going to give you a few minutes to actually put this magic trick into practice straight away. Because these are the kind of things that honestly I think feel so uncomfortable when you first hear about them. Edja, I'm sure you can speak to this from clowning school, but I definitely have memories of doing improv courses a couple of years ago, where the first time you'd play a new improv game or the first time you had to get on stage, I was like, oh my goodness, what have I done? So I want this to really feel like a safe space where you can just try these things out. No judgment. Please share freely. Yeah, it's really just a training ground. So, number one, the fantastic binomial. So we've talked about this in the context of our identities as generalists, right? How can we learn from one world and apply that learning to a completely different space or industry or job? Now, I want us to think about this in the context of problem solving. So imagine I am working at an early stage startup and I am reviving our onboarding process. And I'm thinking, okay, I have been part of a number of onboarding processes. None of them have really wowed me. I really want our new joiners' experience to be cool and different. I want them to have a really great first impression and understand that we're a company that does things differently. So, an example of how I might use the fantastic binomial in this instance is to think about the problem I'm solving. Okay, onboarding. And then conjure a word from a completely different field, in this case, campfire, and think, okay, what comes up for me when I think about these two words together? What would happen if we got all our new joiners to sit in a circle, maybe around a fire, and tell stories to each other? Or the other example here is quarterly planning and a postcard. Okay, we're doing our quarterly planning. What might a good constraint be? Okay, if the whole quarter had to fit on a postcard, what would we cut? So you can start to see where I'm going with this. Oh yeah, before I move on, sometimes I think this can feel a little bit abstract, and you can maybe think, okay, this is like a cool tool, but when could I actually use this in practice? So I've put some ideas here for when you might be able to use this. Naming things, ideating campaign ideas, zazzing up strategy docs. I don't know if that's a real word, but I like it, so I used it. Or reigniting stale rituals, like, for example, your onboarding process, are some examples of how you might use the fantastic binomial at work. But I'm sure you guys have way more ideas of how this might be applicable to you. So now it's your turn. I want you to think of a problem that you're currently trying to solve at work. And I want you to pair it with a word you get from the fantastic binomial tool. You can also come up with this word yourself, but it's more likely that you'll come up with something super random if you use the tool. And maybe click on it a few times because I know some people were having that problem. And I want you to see what magic solution for your problem can you find in between these two words. This is not, the expectation here is not that you are going to solve a gnarly problem that you've been struggling with for 2 months in the next 5 minutes, of course. But really, we are just trying to till the soil. We're trying to create different inputs to our thinking process so that we can make our creative outputs kind of fantastical and wild. And even if we may not go with the wildest solution, it's going to stretch our thinking in ways that maybe we haven't done for a while. So I'm going to start the timer now. I'm going to give you 4 minutes just because of where we're at with time. So go ahead. Any questions, feel free to raise your hand or pop them in the chat. Couple more minutes. Okay, great. We are going to stop there. Um, Interesting couple of things in the chat. Would anyone like to share with us? And maybe we can brainstorm together if you do. An insight, a solution, an idea that came up from this exercise.
Nikita, I can go. I am so sorry I was also late. I've been up since I was up until 3 a.m. filling out a grant application. So I'm kind of in the thick of that. And I've been trying to problem solve what the Ripple practice is and how to explain it to people so they understand that it cannot actually be captured in data, because
Hmm.
what the practice is so I make little tokens and they're not API tokens. I mean, Silicon Valley, that seems to be the buzzword right now, but they are handmade 2 by 4 inch pieces of art. And I have something called a Ripple station outside by my mailbox. It's like a little free library, but it houses these tokens, and people are welcome to pick up to three, take them, hand them to a barista, a grocery clerk, anybody in the service industry that normally goes overlooked or unnoticed. Ask them their name, write a personalized note, give it to them.
Mm.
And I am trying to get a grant for taking this practice out in public. I've been doing it for almost a decade. But what I want is for the community to come to a table and
Mm.
make that art collaboratively. And then we cut it up into tokens. And then each person who has attended takes one of those and hands it out. My problem is, how do we capture the ripple effect of that? And
Mm.
because of this, and because my brain is like not really fired up, or maybe that's what I need is to be sleepless, that connection just made sense to me. It's this hidden network, like the mushrooms. It's underground. It really cannot be seen, but there's a lot of collaboration and connection happening beneath the surface. And maybe that's a way to make it more understandable. I don't know, but that's the thought that came to me.
Oh, I'm off mute. First of all, thank you so much for sharing. I love the idea, and it's beautiful. I want to like create a little token box outside my house now to get people doing that. Um, I also love the comparison, or the connection that you've made to the mycelial network. I honestly think that mycelial networks are a great analogy or thinking tool for so many creative problems. But I think particularly in your case, yeah, as you say, if you are trying to think about how to connect the dots between all these different people and all of these different tokens, yeah, what exists in the hidden network that maybe you can bring to light. Um, does anyone have, just hearing from Muncie, did anyone have any thoughts or ideas that sprung to mind for them from that? Feel free to also come off mute and share any ideas.
Feel like it's not exactly related to that. I'm just more stuck on the way that you just described this entire practice feels very in line with how I naturally think and look at the world. Like quick, like biography, trained as an architect in college. Then I became an art teacher. Then I spent time in the military, and then I became a Spanish teacher. And then I got involved in local government, and then I became a community organizer, and now I'm a civic technologist. But from each transition, it's about learning the underlying principles of one practice and then applying it to a different field. So architecture taught me a lot of things. So it taught me mostly to be very, very cognizant of the difference between what I see and the structure that needs to uphold that. So when I became a teacher, the question then became, okay, how do I create a very exciting lesson that can energize the most motivated student, but also keep the student who doesn't really care that much, like engaged. But at the same time, how do I make it fun for everyone at this while putting underneath that the foundation of the actual lesson I need to teach. And then when I went into local government, it was more so understanding, okay, this is what the law says, this is what the policy is, but what is the structure? What is the actual outcomes that are going to play out from that? And so how can we create policy that can foresee those consequences? And because it's politics and people have different interests or objectives, then you gotta like balance the scales of what everyone wants and needs. So kind of to go back to the practice of the binomial factorial, if if I got that right, please correct me, Nikita.
Fantastic binomial, but basically.
Binomial, yeah, yeah. It's really trying to like look at your problem, but through the framework and lens of different specialties. So, I mean, my previous job as a community organizer, trying to like find people who can advocate for affordable housing. And the frustration I ran into was, okay, why we're thinking about this like organizers, but if I approach the problem as a marketer and I'm trying to spread a message, and I'm trying to get that to as many people as possible, not just getting it to as many people as possible, but finding my target audience. How would a marketer approach politics differently?
Totally. I love that, Seth. Thank you so much for sharing. I think that's also a very practical way to put this into action. Thinking, okay, I have these hats, and one hat is my hat as a marketer, one is as a community organizer, one is as a writer, a painter, whatever it might be. And I'm going to look at exactly the same problem, but use the part of my brain that I would ordinarily use to do that particular thing. And it really makes you see things in a completely different way. Um, One other thing I was thinking, Mansi, just before we move on, but happy to talk about this at any time because I think it's so cool, is even something as simple as having a little QR code or some kind of identifier on each token, which I'm sure you've thought about before, just so that also the people that receive them have a way to go and like maybe they could upload them to a site where they're all like collaged together and it becomes kind of a community project as well in that way. I don't know, but
I've tried that, Nikita. So I've been doing this for almost 10 years, and I've tried a couple of different things, stamping my
sure.
website, having a QR code, having a Google form. And I've handed out maybe about 3,000 tokens personally. So I've had literally like one-on-one 3,000 conversations with people, handed them in their hands. And just from the Ripple station outside since August of 2025, 1,000 tokens have been taken. And I have literally had two people upload using either the QR code or a Google form. So I
Interesting.
think it's just people, it's in the moment when that interaction happens. It's really, really nice. And kind of these are all, you have to remember, these are all people in the service industry mostly. They have a job to do. They're not going to log that they received this, handmade
Yeah.
work of art. They do email me sometimes 5 years after, and they will say, I still have this in my wallet, or I have this sitting at my desk, and it reminds me that what I'm doing matters. But
Mm,
it's not going to happen right away, is what I've learned.
yeah.
But Etcha and someone else, I think Michelle maybe, gave me some ideas in the chat. So I'm going to look those up as
Nice.
well.
Awesome. I'm glad. Thank you both so much for sharing. Okay, we're going to move on from the fantastic binomial, but I'm glad that it was helpful in some regard. Cool. So this next one is called Make a Riddle. Now, it is literally what it says on the tin. So the idea behind this is that estrangement, aka making things seem really weird and different to how they usually are, is a factory for fresh ideas. So let's take this example. I am a room where everyone talks and nothing moves. What am I? Any ideas? Put them in the chat. I'm going to be very excited if someone gets this, but that's just because I love riddles. Um, Actually, that's such a good point. I should probably say it's like work related. But anyway, for just for time, I'm going to tell you that I'm a status meeting. Okay. But I could have also been many other things, and a status meeting probably wasn't the first thing you thought of. Anyway, the point is that making a riddle, just like the fantastic binomial, is a great way to make familiar things seem strange. And especially when we're doing any kind of storytelling, when we're trying to sell a product, when we are trying to convince a new hire to join our organization, helping them see a problem in a completely different light really makes people excited. And so this is actually one that we're not going to do right now, but I would encourage you to think about or maybe try out in the rest of your week is to describe something you do every week. It could be a repetitive task, maybe it's a newsletter you send out, maybe it's a dashboard that you have to put together. and describe it without naming it. One sentence starting with I am. If you're curious, by the way, about the science, if you can call it that, of making up riddles, Gianni Rodari actually writes about this in his book, The Grammar of Fantasy. So feel free to check that out. I can point people to it later. But one example of this would be I am a garden where I plant words and pull out weeds. That would be editing. Um, Sometimes these exercises might even be just helpful for yourself. We talk a lot in GW about how to pitch ourselves, how to talk about all these different crazy, wonderful things that we've done in a way that is coherent and makes sense to people who are maybe not generalists. And this is a really great way to paint someone a picture, which we know speaks 1,000 words. So, moving on to the last one, this is what I like to call cross the border. And it's all about using metaphors and similes. So, the idea here is that you can unleash a lot of magic when you use a metaphor in a really powerful way. So, this one is a bit weird, but apparently, because I was really in my pastry chef era, I've never been a pastry chef, by the way. I should really, I feel like I'm just giving misinformation at this point. Our newsletter is just like, for example, a sourdough starter. It just needs feeding on a schedule, not rescuing when it dies. I've personally found that mastering metaphors, not that I'm a master by any means, but trying to, is a really great way of translating across domains. So if I've ever been managing someone or managing up to someone, and I've been really trying to get them to understand my perspective or my idea, but they come from a completely different world, maybe they're an engineer or a designer, and I'm not. Figuring out a metaphor that everyone can relate to, or perhaps is really relevant in their field, is such a great translation mechanism. So, this is one that I'm going to get us to do just for a few minutes right now. I want you to take one thing from your work that feels a bit stale right now, maybe a process that you've needed to update for a while, or something like that. And I want you to finish this sentence. X, the thing that feels stale, is just like Y from another world I've lived in. It just needs Z, Z. Now, yeah, that might not immediately read like a metaphor, but it could be a simile, just some kind of comparison. I'm going to give you literally 2 minutes to think of this, and then if anyone wants to share back, they're welcome to before we close it out. So 2 minutes starting now. Cool. We will stop there. Anyone who would like to share, please pop up your hand. Victoria, go for it.
I'm cheating because this is one I did use really in the last 6 months. Um, so it was to try and end the bun fight from different levels of leadership about design job profiles. And I said, design job profiles are like burger chefs. You don't describe the detail of the burger they make, you describe the skill and ownership that they're going to use. A portfolio is where they show you if they're flipping burgers in McDonald's or serving up delights like Marco Pierre White.
Nice. I love the little rhyme there too. I don't know if that was intentional or just a happy accident, but even better. Love it. Thanks for sharing, Victoria. Food metaphors are a massive one. I find like the ones that often work the best and are the most kind of universally relevant for people are nature metaphors and food metaphors. Um, so if you're ever stuck, then try one of those. Mansi, I love the tokens one. That's perfect. And Angela, thank you for sharing as well. GW community is a playground just like improv comedy, but it's not pretend playing, it's real people. Love it. Very good. Um, cool. Let's wrap it up there. I hope that this has been a fun experience and that you have learned at least one new way in which to exercise your imagination in a really practical way. Um, I just want to remind you quickly of the tools that we've talked about. So the first is the fantastic binomial. You can use this really quickly by thinking of a problem you're stuck on and coupling it with a random word from a random field and seeing what comes out the other end. Number two is the riddle making. So this is the one we didn't try, but I'd really encourage you to. What creative juices can you find when you don't name something that you're very familiar with? How can you think about it in a completely different way? And lastly, mixing our metaphors. One really easy way to use this is as we did, a problem I'm solving at work is just like this other problem that I experienced in a completely different world. So that is your spell book for today. I encourage you to choose one spell that you've learned today and cast it sometime before Monday. And please share if you're part of the community in Slack, what the results were, how people responded, or even how it just made you feel if it was with yourself. And that is it from me today. I would love to, for the last few minutes, take any questions, thoughts. Um, yeah, as I said at the beginning, this could be anything about related to the workshop, about portfolio careers, generalism in general, anything that's on your mind. Once again, feel free to either pop up your hand or share in the chat.
Like a general question for you, Nikita. When did you realize that you were a generalist? I feel like it takes a while to think about like how we progress through life, especially like as a former teacher, like being a student, then teaching, then the military, then back to finishing college, and back to being a teacher, and realizing, especially when I was grading kids, that my grades for you aren't really a judgment on your intelligence. I'm really just categorizing you guys on how well you can follow my directions.
Yeah, it's a it's something that I feel like happens for everyone at very different stages of their career and life. For me, there are two particular moments I remember. One was, and I promise I'm not just saying this, but I was on a call just after COVID, I think it was 2021 or 2022, with a woman who kind of very randomly at the end of the call mentioned this thing called Generalist World and was like, "Oh, have you come across this woman Millie online? She writes about being a generalist." And I was like, "No, I'll check it out." And then I called Outreach Millie and we ended up working together and now we're best friends. So that was a great story. But honestly, realizing that there was a whole community that Edra and Millie had been already building around generalism was such a big validator for me and I think for many other people in the GW sphere. And secondly, this actually happened years before. I had a very traditional education, a very narrow education in the UK. And so the idea of not just being like a humanities and social sciences person, but actually being someone who is obsessed with like science and philosophy and art and all these different things as well was a bit foreign to me because we didn't have anything like liberal arts. And I stumbled across, this is really just a shout out, I think, to all my former employers, but I came across this university called the London Interdisciplinary School um, before it had even opened its doors. I think it must have been like 2018, 2019. And I ended up working there for years afterwards, loving it. And basically, that was another space that had been created just for generalists, interdisciplinary thinkers who really didn't feel like they fit in any other place. And so, personally, it's been finding and really inhabiting those spaces that's made me realize, oh, I am a generalist and it's okay. And it's actually great. It's a superpower. Hopefully that answers your question. Leader.
Yes, hi. I have a question. Basically, how does one know whether they're building a portfolio life by design versus just avoiding committing to a path? Like, how long of an experiment before you're like, oh, I just like to do everything?
Oh my gosh, story of my life. I don't feel qualified to answer this question. I'm gonna say straight up because this is something that I question literally every single day of my life. Like, am I just afraid of commitment? Or do I really just love trying a bunch of different things? And is it okay to live life this way? I'll share two learnings. One is, I think in today's world, there is a bit of a predisposition to thinking that there's something wrong with us, to thinking like, oh, we do things in this way that is maybe a bit countercultural or doesn't fit the mold of the boxes that we've been taught, categorize the world around us. And it makes us feel like, oh, maybe there's something wrong with us, or we're doing something in the wrong way, or our brains work differently, or whatever it might be. And I don't think that that is the most helpful way to think about it. I often ask myself this question, what is helpful for me to believe? And what's helpful for me to believe is maybe not, oh, there's something wrong with me and I'm like a commitment phobe or whatever it might be, but actually I get loads of energy from trying different things and being in different spaces and working with different people. And I managed to create what I think is a decent amount of value from existing in the working world like that. There is a limit to everything, right? And I think it's for each individual to figure out what their thresholds and boundaries are. But generally, that's something that I have found to be quite helpful. And then the last thing I'll say is I was reading a Substack article literally today about being a nomad and moving around a lot and stuff like that. And the article was talking about this concept called a provisional life that I'd never come across before. I can't remember who it was who came up with that. But I think it's kind of the flip side or the shadow side of what I just said, which is that at some point you may end up feeling really tired, to put it bluntly, or frustrated, and think like, okay, why actually, to use the nomad example, am I constantly leaving or constantly quitting or constantly starting over? Is there something deeper at play here? Doesn't mean there's something wrong with me, but there might be a reason. Is it that I'm actually really afraid of hard work? Like when it gets to the really gritty part, I actually kind of run away. Or is it because there's a really good reason why I'm starting over? Like this idea didn't work out, or I've realized that actually I'm an artist at heart and I want to like go on a sabbatical and do the artist way. Like these things are okay, but I think recognizing the patterns and questioning them is always a healthy thing to do. I see some activity in the chat. But maybe one last question we can take, and feel free to reach out to me. I forgot to go to the next slide, but my email should be there. Yes, it's there. If you want to reach out, if these ideas are interesting to you as well, I also write a lot about them on my Substack, so you're welcome to reach out to me there as well.